Welcome to Foundation Friday. The dedication and covenant of silent unity was signed on December 7th, 1892 by Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, founders of the Unity movement. It is unlikely when they signed this covenant that they had any idea how far-reaching unity would be as it evolved into the church we know and love today. We invite you to join us as we explore and share some of the original ideas, teachings, and writings of the men and women who created the foundation of the Unity Church.
Hi, thank you for joining us today for Foundation Friday. Last week, you may have caught our episode of Foundation Friday, where we went over some of the backstory of Unity co-founder Myrtle Fillmore. So it only seemed fair that this week we should look at some of the backstory of Charles Fillmore. We know that whenever we're getting to know a character and looking at their life and what their life has meant, it helps to get an idea of just where they came from. So we're going to look back in time to the early life of Charles Fillmore. I am taking my information from unity.net, specifically an article on Charles Fillmore's early years, youth, and the dawn of life. I am also quoting from Wikipedia online. So here's what I found. I hope that you will enjoy getting to know a little bit more about Charles Fillmore. So he was born August 22nd, 1854. That makes him 9 years younger than Myrtle Fillmore. And I hadn't been aware of that until I started putting together their backstory. I found out some other interesting things as well. He was born at 4 a.m. on an Indian reservation just outside the little town of St. Cloud, Minnesota, in a log cabin that his father, Henry, had built by a ford over the Sayak River. He was christened Charles Sherlock Fillmore, but he never used his middle name, Sherlock. Charles was less than 2 years old when he and his mother were alone in their cabin, and a band of painted Sioux rushed up. The leader, a towering medicine man, fantastically painted and decked in the full regalia of his profession, strode into the cabin, tore little Charles out of his mother's arms, and rode away with him. It was evening before the warriors brought him back to his distracted mother. Where they had taken him and what they had done with him, Charles could not remember, but he always had the feeling that they had used him in some mystical ceremony. So, how interesting is that? To be stolen at the age of 2 with no explanation whatsoever. Charles Fillmore once wrote about one of his ancestors, John Fillmore. As a boy of 13, he was kidnapped on the coast of England by pirates. He was on that pirate ship for 18 years. Finally, he and a companion tied the pirates while they were under the influence of liquor and sailed the ship into Boston Harbor, where the pirates were executed. This little incident in my family history has often reminded me of what a lecturer once said about his family tree, that he was afraid to look it up because he had no idea what would be hanging from it. Millard Fillmore, the 13th president of the United States, was Henry Fillmore's second cousin. Henry Fillmore was Charles's father. An uncle of Henry's, Glezzen Fillmore, was the very first ordained Methodist Episcopal minister in New York State and established the first Methodist Episcopal Church in Buffalo, New York. When Charles was 7, his father Henry left home. He had managed to acquire some land about 10 miles north of the cabin where the boys lived with their mother, and he built another cabin for himself. From then on, the boys spent part of their time with their mother and part of their time with their father. Charles had a brother, Norton, so he's one of 2 boys. His brother Norton ran away from the home and never returned to live with them. He disappeared into the West, and he was out of the life of Charles completely, except for rare occasional contacts. It was a short time after his brother left that Charles Fillmore met with an accident that was probably the determining incident in his life. Now, my research says this accident happened when Charles was 10, and I found another note that said he was 12. So it was sometime between the ages of 10 and 12 that he had his hip dislocated in a skating accident. He was taken to a doctor that decided that rheumatism had set in and treated the boy for that. There was no improvement. Instead, the leg grew steadily worse. A succession of doctors produced a succession of diagnoses, but no improvement in the patient at all. In the words of Charles Fillmore himself, I was bled, leeched, cupped, lanced, seasoned, blistered, and rolled. 6 running sores were artificially produced on my leg to draw out the diseased condition that was presumed to be within. Physicians of different schools were employed, and the last one always wondered how I ever pulled through alive under the treatment of the quack that preceded him. And as I look back now, it's a miracle to me how I ever got away from them all with the little bundle of bones and sinews I found in my possession after they had finished their experiments on me. By that time, the hip socket had been completely destroyed. The leg had stopped growing and could not be moved. For more than 2 years, the disease ran its course in his leg, sometimes seeming to disappear only to return with increased violence. Many times during the course of the sickness, Charles did not believe that he was going to come through. Often he must have wondered why he was making the struggle. It was a titanic struggle, but there was a titan in that little boy, and the struggle was made. Whenever he could be, he would be up and about on a pair of handmade crutches, hopping around the cabin, doing all he could to help. When the disease would bring him down again, it did not bring down his spirit. He never gave up. Charles Fillmore wore a 4-inch lift in his shoe with his shorter leg. He was in pain all the time. In his early years, despite little formal education, he studied William Shakespeare, Lord Tennyson, Ralph Waldo Emerson, Charles Lowell, as well as works on spiritualism, Eastern religions, and metaphysics. He met his future wife, Mary Carolyn Myrtle Page. We did her last week, so I hope you got to see that. In Denison, Texas, in the mid-1870s. So I looked up Denison, Texas, the Wild West, right, to see what that was like. And I found out that Denison was founded in 1872. So it was a pretty recent town when Charles and Myrtle met, in conjunction with the Missouri, Kansas, Texas Railroad. It was named after wealthy Katy Vice President George Dennison because the town was established close to where the railroad crossed the Red River. It came to be an important commercial center in the 19th century West. Fun fact, in 1875, the mid-1870s, when Charles and Fillmore were both there, Doc Holliday had his offices in Denison, Texas. I didn't find any record of them knowing each other, but I thought it was fun. They were all there at the same time. After losing his job there, Charles Fillmore had worked as a chief clerk in the freight office of the Missouri, Kansas, and Texas Railroad in Denison. And we know that Myrtle Fillmore was working as a teacher in Denison, Texas. So after losing his job, he moved to Gunnison, Colorado, where he worked in mining and real estate. Charles married Myrtle in Clinton, Missouri on March 29th, 1881, and the newlyweds moved to Pueblo, Colorado, where Charles established a real estate business with the brother-in-law of Nona L. Brooks. She was the founder of the Church of Divine Science. So metaphysics abound. Okay, so the rest of the story we pretty much know. I'll go over this little bit and then I'll let you go for the day. After the births of their first two sons, Lowell Page Fillmore and Waldo Rickett Fillmore, the family moved to Kansas City, Missouri. 2 years later, in 1886, Charles and Myrtle attended New Thought classes held by E.B. Weeks. Myrtle subsequently recovered from chronic tuberculosis and attributed her recovery to her use of prayer and other methods learned in Weeks' classes. So that story is the same for both Charles and Myrtle. This is where they became the co-founders of the Unity movement. I hope you enjoyed the backstory of Charles Fillmore. And if you missed last week's backstory of Myrtle Fillmore, I hope you'll go back and find it. I found it very interesting to kind of get a taste of who these two were before they met and founded Unity. Is there anyone whose backstory you would like to know about? If so, please leave us a note and let us know. We read in and reply to all of your comments. Thank you for joining us. Namaste.
Thank you for joining us, and let's stay connected and grow in spirit. We are on Facebook. Search for Unity Church of El Cajon and follow us and like our posts. You can reach us on YouTube at Unity Church of El Cajon. Please subscribe to our channel, watch our videos, and leave comments which can help us improve. We are on the web at unityofelcajon.org. Email or call our church office to receive our weekly newsletters, which lists all of our activities and opportunities to learn and grow together.